Hi guys, welcome to this video. So in this video we'll be giving permissions to a user at namespace level. So we'll be giving all access to namespace level to permission to a user to call as David. So I have one cluster that's a kind cluster which is being created. If you don't know how to create kind clusters, I've written a blog. Possibly you read the blog. I'll add in the description. You can possibly create a EC2 instance in AWS, and on top of that EC2 instance, you can create kind cluster. When you will be able to create this kind cluster on Docker containers. Only requirement is Docker containers and also kind by binary packages, which are required by to create the cluster. So that's very simple. That's not the video which I want to make here. So I'll be attaching a video on how to create kind cluster also at the top. If you could see, it is on the top. So let's how do we give a user how do we create a user and give access to him at namespace level? Let's suppose a user joined our company and we have multiple namespaces, and one of the namespace where user want to work is development namespace. So for that, how do I give namespace level complete access to a user? How do I give that? So for that we need to create a user, and then we have to add certain things. We have to do certain things. Let's do that. The username is David. First of all, let's check. Do we have the First of all, let's check. Do we have the namespace? Yes, we have namespace. Let's describe the namespace and see. So we have the namespace. We just need to attach the user to this namespace so that he has the access to deploy into this namespace. So how do we do that? First of all, we have namespace. So let's create a role binding. 𝐾 create David admin. That's the role name I want to give. Cluster role. Cluster role would be admin. This is the important thing. Like we have to give all access to the user at namespace level, right? Right, cluster level, cluster role, admin. User David. Then -n dev. This is created. Let's check the cluster role binding if it is there. Role binding, not cluster role binding. Role binding. Is there, right? 95 seconds back it got created. So we have cluster role binding created. So after creation of the cluster role binding, we need to generate a key, generate certificate for this user David. Let's create a private key for David. This is the command for that. Where are we? We have to create a folder called as David. This is the command for that. David key, private key. We are creating a private key. After that, we have to sign the certificate for user David. This is the command for that. if you do ls hyphen lrth, there will be two keys. CSR is certificate signing request, which you have sent it to API server to certify that David that the user is David for the identity purpose. After that, sign the CSR using. So we have generated CSR for David user. After that, we have to sign the certificates using CSR and authenticate to Kubernetes cluster CA and create David client certificate valid for 365 days. Let's do that. This is the command for that. It is saying something like we don't have. It doesn't have anything else. It doesn't have this folders or anything, right? It's saying that. So as this is a kind cluster, we need to get into the container and try to exec into the container and try to check if that certificates are there or not. This is the command for that. So it is here inside the container, like exec I'm docker exec I'm doing a multi-container control plane. That's the control plane ID, and I'm doing ls of etc Kubernetes PK certificates. I'm doing ls. After that, we need to copy two certificates to locally to the folder where I'm working. Okay. After it is copied, we need to sign the certificate. So sign the certificate. This is the command. To ls hyphen lrth lb certificates. David key and CA and CA cert and CA key is there, right? So we have copied it into this folder. That we have to sign the CSR using a certificate CA cert. So once we do that, our David is authenticated to the cluster. So okay, so that completed. It is completed, right? We'll have under CSR, I suppose. So we have under CSR, right? Under cert, David cert. So with David cert is generated. Now we have access to the cluster via David cert, David certificate. So what did we do? We first of all what did we do? We have created a certificate for user David, and after that we have signed the certificate. And after that we have signed the certificate using our CA, Kubernetes CA. That's all. After we sign the certificate using Kubernetes CA, David cert is created and it is valid for 365 days. And after that we need to now, rather than giving our admin.conf, we will create the David kube.conf. Let's create a kubeconfig for David user and give that kubeconfig to the David user. To create that, there is a command kubeconfig kubectl config set cluster kind. Kind is the name of the cluster, name of the cluster. Like I want to give that this YAML name is kind. I want to give. So if you run this command, it will generate a kubeconfig. Oh, no file it is saying. Okay, was giving the wrong path. So this command, what it will do is it will try to store the kube API server address credentials and CA certificate in davidkube.conf. This will kubectl which cluster to connect to and how to verify the cluster identity. Let's see. David kube.conf is created here. Let's change the path here. So let's see what is there in davidkube.conf. So it has the server IP, and also IP is everything I've given because I want the cluster to be connected via anywhere from the internet. We don't do in production, but to show you how it is done in for giving permission to a user, I've created this cluster. So this is only for this purpose. So you don't use it in production. Now let's add David certificate and key for authentication purpose. This is the command for that. Let's check what is added here. Now the next command is this config set credentials David, right? So config set credentials David, it adds users to credentials to kubectl and David username is stored in kubectl. After that, client certificate home ubuntu dev david.set, that's a David certificate, and after that client key, it is dev home ubuntu dev david key. That's the key of the David private key, and embed hyphen search is equal to true. If you see, this is something, it is embed certificate key into kubeconfig, and this file upload file to update. There is a file to update, so that's what we have given. So after I done this command and check kubeconfig of David, there's something should be added in this. It got added, right? Client key and client certificate got added. After that, we have to set the context. Set context is, creates a context, and context name is David dev. Cluster kind is equal to user cluster entry. That's the kind cluster, right? We have kind cluster name. That's the name of the cluster we gave in kubeconfig file. And user entry is David, and also namespace is what access we want to give. That is namespace dev, and kubeconfig is this one, and we'll update the kubeconfig file. Once this is done, let's check what is there inside kubeconfig. It has updated these things. Context, I have updated the context, right? After that, let's run this command to use the context. This command to use the context kubeconfig, use context dev David, and then kubeconfig file. Once that is done, let's check the if he is able to get the pods. David is able to get the pods. For checking that, let's not set the kubeconfig as of now, because we can set the kubeconfig on fly also. Kubeconfig get pods. Nothing is found in the namespace because we have not get nodes set. Let's do get nodes. We will not be able to access it. Forbidden. We have given all access at the namespace level. So that's how it is. Let's check role binding. he should be able to access role binding because we have got all permission at the namespace level. He is able to access the role bindings. So first of all, that's how it is. So let's check if we can create the pod at dev namespace. It is yes, right? Kubectl auth, can I create pods? Can I delete pod? Let's check if we can delete the pods. Yes. And also let's try to create one pod and try to see if it is right, if he is able to do that. Get pods. Okay, get pods. Is able to get also. And delete also. Let's see delete also. So he has admin level access at namespace level. So admin access at namespace level. So nothing to be worried now. Now he has admin level access at namespace level. So we have not given complete cluster level access to him, but only at the namespace level, dev namespace level. So this is how you give access to someone who is joining to your team, new one, and you can restrict the access at read only access also at dev namespace. So we can give that. You can only list the resources in the namespace. So that we can do that. If at all we can attach the role binding to correct role, or read only role we can attach the role binding to. That is possible. So we have restricted the user to have admin level access at namespace only. So this is how you give the admin level access at namespace only to a user. So what did we do in this complete thing? What did we do? First of all, we created a role binding and we attached that role binding to a role called as admin, cluster role admin. After that, we created a certificate for a user. After that, we have signed the certificate. Using cluster CA, and that signed the certificate created David.cert, David.crt. After that, we have set the kubeconfig in Kubernetes cluster by using commands such as kubeconfig set cluster kind server HTTPS and certificate authority and C embedded cert and true, and we have given all those things. We have run that 4 commands to create the kubeconfig file for David. So we don't need to give admin.conf to, we don't need to share admin.conf to the David user. We can just share David kubeconfig to the user, and he'll be able to access the cluster at his namespace level. So we can do that. So that's all I want to cover in this complete video. Thank you for watching. Hope you might have learned something in this video.